There's one thing that everyone seems to know about floor sanding, and it's wrong. This video is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. What I'm going to do is sand the floor in this incorrect way and show you just how bad the results are. I'm going to show you how to fix the issue if you have created this issue already, and I'm going to talk about why everyone seems to be scared to do it my way and why they shouldn't be scared at all. I'm really nervous about this, to be honest. This floor has got a 4mm wear layer. I've already sanded it once. I'm going to sand it badly again. If this doesn't work, I've got one chance basically. 40 grit is the most common starting grit, so I'm going to start there. Now you might be thinking, there's nothing wrong with the way he's sanding that floor, and you'd be correct. I'm not doing anything wrong here. Okay, so now comes the 60 grit. Okay, now I'm doing it wrong. Call the police, there's a bad boy in town. All will be explained in just a sec. So now this is the 80 grit, I just forgot to show the camera. And now onto the 100 grit. So right now the floor looks really smooth. And most people will be thinking, oh my goodness, this is great. This is gonna look fantastic. Unfortunately, a lot of problems with sanding you can't see until the finish is down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buff the floor just to give it a nice smooth surface, and then I'm going to stain it and I'm going to lacquer it. Staining the floor might seem a little unnecessary, but the reason why I'm doing this is going to become obvious a little later on. Now I'm applying the first coat of finish, and I've decided to go for semi-gloss because the more glossy the finish is, the more it shows up imperfections, which is the whole point of this video. Right, so it's getting pretty late here now, so I'm going to buff the floor, hoover it and get the last coat down, and come back tomorrow morning and see how it looks. Okay, so it's the next day now and everything's all dry. Doesn't look too bad. I think the colour looks a bit putrid, to be honest, but on the whole, doesn't look too... Oh, there's the problem. It is wave sitting. Look at that. So the one thing that everyone seems to know about floor sanding is that you have to sand with the grain of the wood. Well, if you just sand the floor straight, this is what your floor is going to look like. There's a lot of disagreement about what causes these ripples, and I'm going to set the record straight. Now, some of you might say that the sanding machine wasn't balanced correctly, or the wheels are covered in dirt because that can make it vibrate. There's a problem with the abrasive. There's dirt on the top roller, so that the belt goes like this. There's dirt on the top roller and that's making it vibrate. You've got resonance. So sometimes when a floor is fitted on joists and they're a certain width apart, the vibrations from the machine can make the floor vibrate and it actually causes it to ripple. And so you get this very consistent ripple over the whole floor. And that is what the majority of people said when this picture here was posted in a Facebook group asking what the problem was. Most of the people there said it's because of the machine, it's because of the floor. But in reality, you can have a perfect floor and you can have a perfect machine and it's still going to create those ripples. And at the same time, you can have a machine that has a dirty top roller, it's got dirty wheels, it's got a damaged abrasive, but if you change direction, it's going to get rid of all of that. So none of it really matters if you just change the direction that you're cutting at least once during the sanding process. It's going to be fine in the end. Finishing sanders will smooth that out to a degree, but I've actually had this many times on jobs before, back when I first started, and just like I think most professionals now, they kind of ignore that it's happening. And in this little debate online, there were loads of guys that had they were saying, I've got 25 years experience, I've got 30 years experience, I've got 20 years experience, and I've never not sanded the floor straight. And so I went to their business pages and I could see pictures with ripples in the floor. So I know that might sound bad, but I noticed that it's everywhere. Before I show you how to fix this problem and how to prevent it in the first place, I'm just going to describe to you exactly what causes this. Every board is ever so slightly different in density. So you can see here, where this board ends and that board begins, this board is much more dense and this board is much less dense. So if you're going across it with a consistent speed and you've got a consistent pressure on the drum, and this board is more dense than this board, then theoretically it's going to sand this board down more than this board. Not just that, once you've created a little step down there, and you go and you do the next cut, you begin to create a line that goes across the floor, so it begins to travel. Now, not only do the boards vary in density, you've got variations in density within the board itself. So for example, here, you can see just here, that's where the soft grain is. And because it's just got that little bit larger area on the board that's soft, it's created a line, and the same with the next bit. So you've got that bit there and then that bit there, and it's created a line on both of those. But then if you've got a knot that's much more dense than the rest of the board, that will create a little bump up. So you've got knots in the floor, you've got the soft grain, which can cause little divots in the floor, and then you've got these steps here that go from one board to the next. So as the sander goes over a drop in density like this and it creates a dip, and then the wheels go over that, it will then create another line over here where the drum is at that point. So I think you can just see it there. So here's the end of the board, and when the wheel drops down just after it, that's where it creates this dip here. God, this is difficult. There's the dip, which is in line with the drum. And the same is true for the back wheel. So every time the wheels go over a dip or a bump, and it just spreads out to the side and it translates into other areas in the floor until you completely covered the floor in ripples. Okay, now I'm going to demonstrate exactly what happens when you do a cross cut to try and correct these issues, and with the dark stain, it's going to highlight it perfectly. Okay, so what you can see here is where the dip was, it's still quite dark, but where the peak was, it's gone very light. And so by going diagonally like this, you're actually riding the ridges, the tops of the peaks of these ripples, and bringing them down to level with the dips. So as you keep going across it, it's going to eventually take this down until it's level with this, and then you're going to have this just as light as the rest of it. So when you've got the drum going straight along the boards, it drops down, it hits this kind of cliff of density and drops down into this board here. Whereas when you go diagonally, you've left the board, but some of the drum is still on the previous dense board, and it's holding it up and riding those ridges to bring it down flat. And that's why you can kind of see the ripples in the floor. You can see where it's kind of riding the ridges and taking them down to level with the valleys. Not to belabor the point, but if you watch my crude demonstration here, you can see that the drum kind of just drops into the dips, exacerbating the problem. Whereas if you go diagonally across them, it just glides over those peaks and brings them down to level with the dips. The next thing I promised to talk about was why people seem to be scared to sand their floors diagonally. But just before I get to that, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe, because I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. I will be active in the comment section below. And if you're interested in taking the video course, then there's a link in the description. If you're in the process of sanding your floor and you've created some imperfections like this, then don't worry too soon, because it can't possibly be as bad as this was. So the people taking my video course have told me that they're scared to sand their floors diagonally because they're worried that the scratches won't come out. Well, I hope that clears that up.